Hello and welcome to the very first episode of My PlayStation and Me. I am one of your hosts, MCFixer, alongside the one and only Mr. Midas. Hello Midas, how are you?
Going on my G's, we are here. You get me? That's good.
It's ridiculous, Rahul. And my man Rahul, how are you, sir?
What up?
So
Man,
Midas just went from like no energy to like the typical Midas energy in a matter of seconds. It's ridiculous.
I love it, man. I love it.
How?
To give you a quick behind the scenes, yeah, this is early. Man does not do the morning thing, and I came in quiet. I let them know when the pod starts, man's gonna bring the energy in it. This is what man does.
Ridiculous.
I love it. A true professional.
So for those who don't know what this is or what we're doing, My PlayStation and Me was literally an idea that I wanted to do for a while. Most people know I am mainly known for Xbox coverage. I've been covering Xbox now for probably about 5 or 6 years. And there was only 2 people that I wanted to do this with. Rahul, me and you met 5 years ago now. 5 years ago now.
Literally, yeah, just a few days ago, it was 5-year anniversary of our meeting.
Which is
Facebook
wild.
memories told me.
And you're probably the biggest PlayStation fan that I know that isn't on the inside of the industry. In terms of, I know you work in the industry and we're going to get to that, don't you worry. But like on the press or enthusiast press side of things, you're probably the biggest PlayStation fan that I know. So you always have great insight. We've done a little bit of work together before covering PlayStation's press conferences and stuff like that. You always speak very elegantly and from a fan's point of view,
thanks, man.
Which is amazing. And that's why I wanted you on this. I think you're the perfect fit to come on and just talk PlayStation. And Midas, we all know where you stand when it comes to PlayStation. My man, I remember going to EGX and we're walking around. I had an Xbox jumper on. We're in the PlayStation section. He's like, yo, you can't be wearing that in this section, fam. What are you talking about? I'm like, yo!
Move from right there, my G.
See?
We don't want you around there. No, man. All jokes aside, you know, I love all consoles, I love all games, but I am known as Mr. PlayStation.
Which is wild. But I thought what we would do for this episode, I thought, look, nothing is planned with all this. This was purely a thing of like, people want it. We'll see how the first episode does. We'll see what people think of the episode. This is a pilot, and we'll go from there. So I thought we would start with like our history in gaming. Rahul, I think we'll start with you. Like, where did like your love of video games come from? And then we'll specifically get to PlayStation later. But like, do you have like an early memory of like what started you on your journey of being a gamer?
Ooh. So actually, like, I would always say that my first memory is me getting my PS1 on my 7th birthday. But actually, the more I thought about this a bit, actually, a few, like, sort of recently, and actually it's playing Age of Empires on the PC with my dad.
Okay.
Because my dad loves RTS games like Rise of Nations, Age of Empires, sort of Red Alert, like Command and Conquer. That was my dad's jam. And when he got Age of Empires and we got a PC in our house, I used to play that with him. I didn't really understand what I was doing because I was like 6 or 5 or something, but I used to sit with him while he played it. And that's my earliest memory. And then I guess my dad must have realized that I was sort of into gaming or I was interested in what he was doing. So then he bought me a PlayStation 1. And that's where, you know, I had my own console. And then me and my brother used to sit together and play that. And that's how it really began. And that's where my PlayStation history begins.
Interesting.
Do you know what? I never knew anyone could go from the PC master race to a console. like that's not even heard of. I didn't even know that was possible.
Midas, what about you?
There you
like,
go.
Where did your like history of gaming start off? Obviously, you've been playing games for a long, long time. Like, where does it start for you?
So it's mad because, and that's why I'm really excited to do this episode with everyone, because I fly the flag for PlayStation all of the time, and we'll get into it a bit later. But I didn't start off as a PlayStation gamer. Like, PlayStation is really a late part in my life in gaming. So I started old school on the Master System. We're talking like Alex the Kid, and them thing there. You could swipe up your Master System, and even without putting a cartridge in it, it had a game in it already. Like Wonder Boy, games like that. So I've been gaming since I was a little man. But the thing that really pinnacles me into gaming is going to arcade as a kid, like with my older cousin. So I've got an older cousin who's in jail right now. We won't get into that. And he used to take me to the arcade when I was little. And all I remember is, I'm saying arcade, it was a kebab shop, fam. But they had 2 arcade machines in there. Yeah. And but all I remember was the sound of Street Fighter. And one thing that always resonated with me was like the Dow Sims level with the elephants, and the elephants making that big noise, and you know how loud arcade machines. This isn't a little kebab shop, you know. Man's buying a 1 piece of chips so the kebab man don't mind, and then just using all of the money. Yeah. And then being able to get a Super Nintendo and have that same Street Fighter game in my house that I can play with my friends and not have to worry about money in my pocket, it like mind blowing. And that's my kind of start into specifically gaming. What about you?
Yeah, for me, I have a really weird history with video games across the board. Like, I started off as a Mega Drive kid, and I remember getting Streets of Rage is like a huge one for me. It's one of the earliest memories I have with me and my dad playing games. And my dad's not a gamer, which is weird because he owns a game shop, but he doesn't play games. That's not like what he does. He repairs consoles and stuff like that. But like he would play Streets of Rage, so that's a very, very early memory for me. Like you say, Alex the Kid, Shinobi, Street Fighter, like all of those type of games of what I grew up on. And it's funny with the arcades, like my dad in his shop, he has the Marvel vs. Capcom 3 arcade. He still has it to this day. I said to him, I went to see him yesterday, and I said to him, I've got 4 siblings, and like his wife's not into games either. And I just said to him straight, I was like, I want this. I don't want anything from you, I swear. Like anything else, I don't want. Like generally, like you can cut me out the wheel on everything. I don't give a damn. I want this machine. Like to have an arcade machine in your house. You know, like when you go to those big boy houses and you walk around and they've got like that whole man cave room. I'm never going to have that. I know for a fact I'm never going to have that just because prices in London, ridiculous, right? And space, not a thing. But to have, wherever I am, to have that arcade machine, you come to my house and I'll whoop your butt on Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Game over.
You see that arcade machine, that will get flipping burglar shock. Dude. A burglar will try run up on your house and then they just hear bear fighting. They be like, nah, fam, let's move, fam, let's move. This is not the yard for it. They're on smoking there.
But yeah, I have a really weird history with like all games. Like I say, I've had literally every single console. Just because my consoles would come and go, would be replaced with, I had a Mega Drive, I had a Sega Saturn, I had a GameCube, and N64. But I remember the day that I got my PlayStation. I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember saying to my mum and dad, oh, I don't want any presents this year because I know you can't afford to get me a PlayStation. I just want money so I can save up and buy my own PlayStation. I remember my brother giving me a Christmas card that had 50p in it. I remember this like it was yesterday. He's like, that's to go towards your PlayStation. And then I remember like opening all my presents, being like excited. I think I got a bike that year as well. And then I remember the big present came out, you know, that Father Christmas had brought. I remember, and I've been like,
the one that was hidden in the back of the cupboard that you didn't see.
Exactly. And I remember opening it and just being like, I got a PlayStation. It's game over, man. I got a PlayStation, that silver PlayStation. You push the button with the lid come open, and then it was just game on from there. I didn't get any games with it, which was crazy. I just had the demo discs. Remember back in the day when you'd get demo discs?
Demo discs.
Mad. I remember just sitting there playing Abe's Odyssey. That was on there. Destruction Derby, like the first PS1 Destruction Derby. And just absolutely loving it. And that was sort of like, that was the start of my history with video games. I was always into games, but I didn't quite understand them like to that level. Like you just play them, then run off outside, right? Once I got that PS1, it was game over for everybody. I weren't leaving the house. I was like, go play football. I'm like, I'm good. I've got Metal Gear Solid 1. Like, what do you mean I'm going to go outside? No, thank you. But yeah, like, what's your earliest memory? What game was like the game for you, Midas? Can you remember like the game that you was like, oh, this is not just a toy. This is not just a plaything. This is not just something that I do like. You know, like, some people are into football, some people are into sports, some people are into drawing, some people are into all these things. We are clearly into gaming. Like, do you have that one memory that you remember, like, sticking out in your head that's like, this was the one that told me gaming was going to be in my life forever?
Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah.
Straight. You
I
see
feel like I knew
me,
you were
yeah.
gonna say that.
You see me, yeah. Like I said, I got my PlayStation late. I started the same as you, Sega kid. Then I went to Nintendo. I've owned every Nintendo console other than the Wii U because it was trash.
I bought a Wii U as well.
Um,
Look, I'm an idiot,
yeah,
fam.
yeah, Wii U was trash. So I like Super Nintendo. I had an N64 before I had a PlayStation. Like I had an N64. All the man then would come round. We'd bang GoldenEye.
Yep.
We'd bang Mario Kart. Like the N64 was my thing. Like for us to be able to play wrestling, all of us in one room. I didn't even really care about PlayStation. Because remember, it's their first console. I was like, who are these guys? Like these guys. Like, I'm the Nintendo kid. You get me?
They make compact
then-
discs, fam. What's going on
Yeah,
here?
yeah, man. This ain't music. This ain't a Bob Marley album, fam. What are you talking about? So, so one of my, I call him my friend. He weren't my friend. Some brother that I knew
Acquaintance.
had,
I use that one a lot.
yeah.
Acquaintance.
yeah. He had the Super Famicom, and we went to his house, and we played Secret of Mana. And Secret of Mana like blew my mind. And I tried to get Secret of Mana, but I could never get it. So I got Legend of Zelda.
Yeah.
And that was my first real game that made me love a single player game. Because for me, gaming was a thing you did with your friends.
Yeah.
Like, even if I would game on my own, it was just because none of my friends were around me. So I was still playing mainly multiplayer games that my friends weren't around, and I'm practicing to bruck them up when they come around. And Legend of Zelda was the first game that was just about me. And Final Fantasy VII, like when I bought that, like I remember my dad bought it for me. My dad took me out, and I remember looking at the back, and I was like, "Wow, these graphics look sick.
Yeah.
These look next level." And then when I switched it on, I was like, "Why they look like triangles and squares?" Nah, man, you don't bump me. And then I realized that it was the fight scenes. But you see what? That's the game that made me a hardcore gamer. Because before, like you said, gaming was just what we did. We just played video games. But Final Fantasy VII was the game that made me say, no, I'm a gamer. Like that's when I started wearing a badge of honor. And that's why PlayStation is so special to me. Like prior to that, I've had tons and tons of consoles. The N64 was the first console that I bought with my own money. Like that was a special moment for me. But nothing made me feel like a hardcore gamer until I played that game. And that changed my life as forever. And even before I ever thought I'd work into this industry, that was the game that I was like, all right, I'm a gamer now.
Yeah. Rahul, what about you? Have you got like a game that sticks out in your head?
I mean, it's so weird because the thing about when I got my PS1, I knew nothing about games other than Age of Empires and PC. Like, I didn't even know what PlayStation was. Like, my parents got it for me. I was like, oh, cool. Like, what is it? Just like, oh, it's like you play games on it. I was like, okay, cool. Like, that sounds great, whatever. And then because my parents knew nothing about games either, really. So their plan was to walk in the store and buy the most colorful, cartoony looking games because I'm a 7-year-old, right? Like, so I never played Metal Gear Solid or Final Fantasy or any of those games. My first ever game that I put in the PS1 was Crash Team Racing because I thought Crash Bandicoot looked cool. And to this day, one of my top 5 games of all time. Like, I love it. Platinum the remaster, done everything, like just sick. And then the other games I had was like Bugs Bunny Lost in Time.
I remember Bugs Bunny, bro.
And Bugs and Taz the Time Busters, and of course Spyro the Dragon. And like those are my first games. And like even then, I was never like hardcore into gaming on the PS1 generation. I had it like along the line somewhere. My dad started buying some games that we could play together. So he bought Tekken 2. So I used to just bottom mash with my dad because again, I didn't know what I was doing. He bought the first Gran Turismo, and I was garbage because there's actually like you actually had to know something about driving. You had to brake. And I was like, I was going from Crash Team Racing to Gran Turismo. Like, what? And then, really, I think in the PS2 era.
Wait. We'll get there. You slow it down. We'll get
No,
Can I ask you one question?
All I was going to say is that PS2 era is when I get a bit more like into it myself and start researching and reading. And that's where it gets more hardcore. But
interesting.
If we get there later, we'll get there.
Is your PlayStation 1 chipped?
Yes, of course. Are you bro? Let me tell you the story about the PS1 being chips. Let me tell you. So again, my
Okay,
dad
here we
owned a
go.
game shop.
Story time, people.
My dad owned a game shop, obviously. Like, he worked with people and he learned, they knew how to chip them. So I remember my dad come home one day with this binder of, like, my dad used to be a DJ as well. So, you know, like the big binders DJs used to have back in the day. Come back with a binder of games. It's like, threw it to me. It was like, use this PlayStation and test it. Tell me every single one that works. And I'm like,
Wow.
wait, what? He's like, they're all games. Just remember like the old silver discs, and it just had a biro, a permanent marker written on it. Like, these are my experiences. That's why I say, like, people say to me like, "Oh, have you played this?" I'm like, "Yeah." It's like, "Oh, do you remember this?" I'm like, "No." They're like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "No, I've played so many games. It is ridiculous." I remember playing my chip one. I used to put a piece of blue tack in the corner of the console because you used to have to take the disc out. So you used to load up the disc. And then to get it out quicker, you put a piece of blue tack in the corner, and then boom. Yes, what my dish, yours was chipped as well, obviously.
Of course, fam, man was chipped. All right, let's just break it down for people who don't understand. Yeah. So, firstly, one thing I want to say is disclaimer: it was illegal to chip your console. If you get a PlayStation now, don't try and chip
Obviously not.
But we understand, like, we didn't grow up with silver spoons in our mouths. Like, man grew up in the hood. Like, parents, they tried to give us everything that they could, but they didn't have money for everything. So to actually be able to get a console, remember, I'm coming from Nintendo, where I'm buying these expensive cartridges for years, and then I get this console. And my brethren's like, "Fam, you need to chip it, you need to chip it, bro." I'm like, "What does that mean?" He was like, "Fam, you know what, yeah? If you chip it, you can play any game, fam. I can get you 10 games for £5.
Yeah.
I'm like, 10 games, £5. Fam. So I gave it to a man. Do you know how shook I was? Like, I had to give my PlayStation to my brethren.
Yeah, I know.
My brethren walked out my yard with my PlayStation. My heart was in my chest for 2 days. And he came back with, like you said, the CD stack of games, and all it was plain white discs with just someone's dead writing. Some of the names weren't even spelt properly, because some of them were Japanese names. And man was writing them. Yeah, man was writing them however he wanted. You get me? Monster Hunter with an O and all of them thing there.
Final Fantasy with a PH.
And you put it in, and like Fixer said, some of them would work perfectly. Some of them you'd have to open it. But basically, you was a kid who was able to experience the amount of games that we was able to experience in demo discs. Because demo discs, there's so many games I only played the demo of and never got the real game. But like, one of my favorite games that most people don't even know about is Toshinden. Like, I was the person who was like, "Tekken's dead. It's all about Toshinden. Toshinden's going to be the biggest thing ever."
You were wrong. You were wrong, fam. You were wrong.
To say the least.
Yeah,
but yeah, that makes me proud, Fixer.
I remember, man. Rahul, you didn't have this experience, I assume.
Well, so the thing is, like, again, as I said, like, I knew nothing about gaming. My parents knew nothing about gaming. And to be honest, like, where I went to school, like, not many of my mates were into gaming either. Yeah. So it was just like, no one really told me about it. So I didn't really know what chipping a PlayStation was. Like, in the same way where your cousin or your mate came to you and said, "You should get it chipped." Like, no one did that for me. And the way that I got games was basically my parents would say that every major holiday I had at school, I'd get one game. So in my Easter break, I'd get a game. In my summer break, I'd get a game. And for Christmas, I get a game. So I get 3 games a year. So it's one of those things where you're coming up and but like, again, with the PlayStation 1, I didn't really care that much because I wasn't into it that much. But like, if I had Spyro, I was like, "Can you get me Spyro 2? Or can you get me Crash Bash or Crash 3 or whatever?"
Bro, we haven't mentioned Croc though. Why have we not mentioned Croc yet? Because Croc was the one back in the day.
I played at a friend's house like later, but I never had it.
Croc was the one.
I'm surprised that it's definitely the kind of game that my parents would have bought. But then they started buying like licensed games. Like I had the Toy Story game.
Oh, that was dope.
Which was sick. Yep. I love that. 100% of that shit.
Yep.
Like a year ago.
One thing we got to mention, Fixer. One thing we got to mention is the PlayStation has some trash on it as well, because it was so easy to develop on it.
Obviously.
Like people talk about like the Apple stores and talk about the Switch
shovelware.
And everything's on the Switch. That shovelware, like Rahul, if your parents took you to the shop and they got you some wrong game, Like, obviously, you're a kid, you're gonna enjoy it, but there was some stuff on there. Like,
it was
what is this?
Trying to think,
like certain people, all they've ever developed is like built Lego, and they're like, yeah, man can make a game now.
But to be honest with you, yeah, I had that experience with Final Fantasy. Like, for me, back in the day, Final Fantasy was trash. Because obviously I grew up.
Mine just died a little bit.
No,
inside.
as a kid,
like, I'm done. I'm done.
No, to me as a kid, like you got to remember, yeah, I was dyslexic, so I couldn't read properly. Didn't know that at the time, so I couldn't read properly. So I'm not reading any of the text, and then the whole game is turn-based. But at the time, as a kid, I don't know what turn-based is, so I'm literally just sat there, like. Wait, why am I not fighting? Why am I not punching? Why am I not kicking? Why am I just clicking menus? Like, this is trash. I had Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy 8, Final Fantasy 10, like obviously 10's a bit further out, but like 7 and 8, I remember just being like, why do I even have these games? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, it's only now that we've got the remakes, I'm like, it's magical. This is the best game ever. Yeah. Midas was right. Like, it's only now that I'm like loving these games. Back then, I remember just being like, I remember my friends just playing, do you want to swap? And I was like, I better not, my dad might beat me. But you can borrow it still. And then being like, this is the best. And I'm like, nah, man, this is trash.
You're not wrong, though. You're not wrong, because when I started, I thought the turn-based was trash. I'm like, why am I, because remember, like, Zelda and all of that, it's all real time. So I had that same experience, but the story gripped me so much that I continued. And then I was kind of like, raw, this turn-based is kind of cool. Do you know how sick it is that you can eat your dinner and play video games at the same time? Do you know how sick that is? Like, my mum, I might get something from the chip shop, chip batty and them thing there. You get me? Chip batty and them thing there. And I'm eating and I can still play the game because it's in turn-based. I do my move, I'm eating my chips and that, do my move. Get me? You can't do that at Street Fighter.
True. But yeah, it's just a weird one. Like when people always say to me, it's like, why are you not into PlayStation? I'm like, I play video games. That's it, period, end of story. Like now, especially now being on the inside, like I play everything. Every PlayStation exclusive that comes out, I play every single one because PlayStation makes some of the most remarkable games in the world. Like bar none. Like even Days Gone, I enjoyed Days Gone. Ghost of Tsushima, I haven't had the chance to finish it yet, but that's a fantastic game. But do you know what I mean? I'm into video games, and that's why I think so special about PlayStation. And that's, we're looking at, to go a little bit forward, it's like Astrobot. Astrobot now holds like a really special place in my heart after playing that on the PS5, right? Because I grew up in a game shop, so I've kind of been around all of these components my entire whole life. And I remember having on the PSX the flip screen that my dad had in his car that you plug in through the cigarette charger port bit. And like I have like, and when I played Astrobot, I was like, it all brought it all back to me, where I was just like, I've had that, and then like obviously to see the Japanese like import ones, that I'm like, what's that? Why did I not have that? What's this?
A PlayStation mouse. I was just like, what?
Exactly.
Like, what's that even for?
Exactly. But Rahul, you was going to tell a story about your PS2. So like your PS2 era, which I remember getting my PS2, same sort of story, was got it for Christmas again, which was mainly when I got my consoles from my mum and dad. Like, how did you get your PS2? Do you remember that? And what was like a game that sticks out in your mind?
So the PS2 is the one that I remember like it was yesterday, because after I've been playing PS1 for a few years, I slowly started meeting other people that were get into gaming, and I would talk about it with people, and I was like, all right, someone was like, "Oh, mate, there's a new PlayStation coming." I was like, "A new one? Like what? That's wicked!" Like I didn't even have like dial up. I didn't even have internet. Probably I didn't know. I didn't. And, like, and I was just like, okay, that's cool. And then I remember I was like started saving for it because I started to get an allowance. Like by the time I got to like 9, I was getting an allowance, and I was like,
"Bruh, Midas, he's rich, fam. What do you mean an allowance?
An allowance, as in like if I do hoovering, and if I do the dusting, I'll get like a $5.
So a $5? This is madness.
I know, sick. But yeah, so I started saving. And then for my birthday, I got some money as well, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna buy the PlayStation 2 because one of my friends had it. I think I got it like a few years like after it came out.
Yeah,
and I just remember like I started seeing magazines in Tesco's, you know, like the PlayStation 2 official magazine.
Yep.
And this was before they put cellophane on it, so you could actually read it
Yep.
in the shop. And that's when I started like, okay, these games now the whole world has just opened up, so I can see like what kind of games actually exist.
Can I interject for 2 seconds and you can go back? It's just because I want to talk about magazines, because magazines played such a huge part in my childhood of the fact that I couldn't have them. My mum used to be like, "Are you crazy? £6 for a magazine? Are you nuts?"
This one got demo disc in it.
But you know what she used to say to me? I love her, yeah, because she used to be like, "You can't even read and you want a magazine." I'm like, you know what? I want to look at the pictures, Mum.
Just want to look at the pictures.
And that's all I wanted to do was look at the pictures. And she was not having none of it. And I remember that moment of like when we walked, it must have been like a W.H. Smith's or a Woolworths or whatever it was back then, and just walking past the magazine rack and being like, video games. What on earth is this? Like, again, Greg Miller, who we all know, and he tells a great story about how like he as a child realized that people were getting paid. I was not that smart, unfortunately. So I just saw they make video game magazines. Oh my god, I must have this. And I, even to this day, when we go on holiday, Haley will pick up a magazine each year, and I always go buy a gaming magazine. Always, no matter what. Because it brings back that feeling of like, yeah, I can afford this now. My mum can't tell me no. There's no way.
Fam, gaming magazines are mad expensive now.
Yep.
They're almost like,
Almost a
the
tenner.
other day. Yeah, I bought 2 gaming magazines for Contra, a friend in the States, because she collects them.
Yeah.
And there's stuff she can't get out there. Fam, it cost me just under £20 for 2 magazines.
Yep.
Keith. And there's no demo discs.
The demo discs back in the day were like the big thing though. Even on the PS2 as well, I was still playing demo discs. I remember them coming in the plastic case.
Same.
We all remember the iconic plastic case with the tiny insert. And it was magical. Go back to your story of what you were saying though. I apologize.
No, I mean, that was basically it. It was like after I found out about magazines and I started reading, like, you know, my mom would do the shopping and I would basically sit there and read the whole magazine. And because my mom never let me buy them either because, you know, expensive.
Waste
and so
of
I was
money.
like, oh, this one looks good. This one looks good. And then again, because I was like 12 or 13 and I still didn't really have my money. My parents didn't let me buy my own games and stuff. So because they were getting to that point where like we want to make sure it doesn't go too out of control, so I could only play on the weekends and after school and like a little bit and shit like that. And so then I started making lists of games that I wanted. So when it was my summer holidays, my parents were like, all right, come on, let's go get you a game. I have a list ready. I've done some research and I was like, all right, these are the ones I want. So then I played like Metal Gear Solid 2. Then I started playing like what else did I have in the early days of PS2?
Tekken Tag Tournament. Tekken Tag Tournament.
I definitely had Tekken 5. That one was.
Madness, you remember Tekken Tag Tournament?
Of course.
That was the one, bro. I used to love that game, and it had a blue disc, which the lasers used to burn out, and my PS2 burnt out at one point, and it couldn't play my Tekken Tag Tournament no more, so I could only play games that had the black disc. Does anyone remember this? Where they would just burn out. I remember selling mine to Game Station, yeah? But I left a disc in it so they would test it with that disc. And I went and sold it and then bought another PlayStation 2. Shout out to Game Station. It was Game Station back in the day. I remember.
Game Station. Yeah,
I was hustling, bro. I was hustling.
I was playing like. I mean, I still had my love for those. I think a lot of my love for like the platformers comes from playing Spyro and Crash because I bought Jack and Daxter. That was one that I read up about and was like this, and it was because it said by the people that made Crash Bandicoot, and I was like, all right, I'm in. Then like Ratchet and Clank was huge for me on PS2, but then also like moving to different genres. So like other than Gran Turismo, I played Need for Speed Underground 2 and Burnout 3 Takedown and like Burnout Revenge. Like solid games for me, like loved them so much, and that was when it really exploded for me. And then going into secondary school, meeting like more people, finding more other gamers. But yeah, it was that was what really took off.
What about you? If you've got like a PS2 game that sticks up?
So, children, sit down. Let me tell you the story.
Here we go.
All right. So I was still Nintendo kid. So on day of release, I bought the GameCube. And that came out 2001, and the PlayStation 2 came out in 2000. So the PlayStation 2 was already out, but I was like, no, like it's gonna be about the GameCube. The GameCube's gonna be the sickest thing. Bought that on day release. Why did I waste my money? And then, but I was still flying the flag for Nintendo. All my brethren were telling me about the PS2, telling me, fam, you can watch DVDs. Come on, they own no DVDs. What are you talking about? I don't own DVDs. I don't need to watch them. I still got a VHS tape that presses rewind. You get me? I'm good.
Oh man.
And then I saw this game, and it was like the most incredible looking game of all time. And I said, this game, ladies and gentlemen, is going to change gaming. This will be the game that defines gaming generations forever. So PlayStation 2, you couldn't get them anywhere. And I was ringing around all of these secondhand shops, and I found one, and I caught a cab to catch one into Mitcham, because I lived in Bricky and I weren't walking with no PlayStation 2 in my hand. So caught a cab there. Cabman took me, the woman bought it, took it in, plugged it in, and I started a game called The Bouncer.
The Bouncer was the one back in the day, brother.
That game
that was my game that I had shipped.
That game was so trash.
No,
that was like the
you're a liar. You're
that
a liar.
Game is the biggest trash that's ever come out of Square Enix. That game visually looks cool. The fighting is okay. It's janky as hell, fam. That game is beyond trash.
Not having it, because I grew up playing Fighting Force.
I'm gonna say my deep voice, trash.
Whatever. Does anyone remember Fighting Force, or it might be Fighting Force on the PS1? I remember. So remember, I grew up on Streets of Rage, right? So the progression of that was in Fighting Force, which was like a similar concept, beat 'em up, but it was like more open world-ish and like obviously 3D polygons. So that was huge. When the Bouncer got announced, bro, but do you know what? I thought it was multiplayer, and I think it might have been, but only on the internet. I didn't have internet. I remember being like, me and my dad sat down to play Bouncer. I'd be like, this is going to be, because we play Fighting Force, we play Streets of Rage. I remember getting it, but sorry, dad, it's just single player. And them just looking at me like, this is it. Handshakes to each other, like, I guess it's where you go on your own, son. I remember sitting there playing the Bouncer, being like, this is what I wanted. Side-scrolling beat-em-ups was what I grew up on as a kid. And this, dude, the graphics were sick for the Bouncer back in the day.
But you know what I think is really revolutionary about the Bouncer? The Bouncer was like one of the first games that were like a system seller. Like that whole system seller thing wasn't like now, like that's just normality to have a game that they promise you how sick the system's going to be before it even comes out. Sonic obviously did that with a Mega Drive because of obviously it being 32-bit. But yeah, that was that first system seller, like, raw, this game is going to be incredible. And it was trash.
No.
Trash. No. But that console was magical. Like, we're talking Final Fantasy X, which is still one of my favorite games. Devil May Cry, obviously, San Andreas thing. DVDs, like, sick. But I bought mine secondhand. It started scratching my games, fam.
Yep, I remember the latest used to do that as well.
Scratching my used to. So after about a year and a half, it just started scratching all my discs. Pissed me off. The man took that long ass cab ride.
The PS2 for me was another one where I remember being same sort of story. It was like, I'm gonna save up and buy one because my mum and dad telling me they're not gonna buy it for me, and then getting it at Christmas again. But yeah, I remember playing. I grew up on a lot of sports games because I had a brother, the exact same. I've got a brother the exact same age as me. So for me, it's like we needed multiplayer games. But the thing that sticks out in my mind for the PS2 era is wrestling games. SmackDown, Here Comes the Pain. SmackDown Shut Your Mouth was on the PS1, if I'm not mistaken. And then SmackDown versus Raw and that whole generation when that started coming. Like, wrestling games for me were like, that was the pinnacle of wrestling games in my mind, even though I know No Mercy on the N64 was better. But I remember just like being able to walk backstage in SmackDown Shut Your Mouth and being able to talk to wrestlers. But I remember like walking up to Jeff Hardy and be like, Jeff, do you want to tag with me tonight? And he's like, yeah, man, I'll tag with you. And I remember being like, oh, I'm tagging with Jeff Hardy tonight. Oh, it was mad. I absolutely loved it. But yeah, I remember Resident Evil 4 was obviously like, I'm a huge Resident Evil fan. I haven't told my Resident Evil story on this because everyone knows it. It's a retired story. No one needs to hear it again. But yeah, Resident Evil 4 though, again, as much as like people know me as like not liking Resident Evil 4 but when that released, It come in I bought it. It had it come in the steelbook, and I remember being like, wow, look, it's a metal case. Like, I think that was like my first ever steelbook, and being like, this is magical. I can't believe I've got this. And when you finally start playing that game and seeing what it did for gaming and what it did for Resident Evil at the time, it was just like, damn, this is crazy. This is crazy. I remember my great granddad. I spent a lot of time with my great granddad, and he used to be huge into cars. So the only game he'd ever watched me play was Gran Turismo, which was, I don't remember what one it was called, but it was one with the red case. It was like an iconic red case.
I think it was A-Spec, like
that sounds
A-Spec
right.
or something like that.
And I remember just sitting there for hours playing that, and then like I remember my aunt used to come in the room and be like, "Oh, you have to buy the Aston Martin. That's my dream car." And then like driving around in the Aston Martin, and like the PS2 built me who I am today. Like really, it really did. It was only the PS3 and we'll get there now, which was when we get to the PS3 era. The 360 was already out. Fight Night had already begun, and I was just like, "Bro, look at the graphics of Fight Night." I'm not being a PS3, so I didn't get a PS3 so I played on PS3s at my dad's shop, like I said before. I remember playing Metal Gear Solid 4, because I remember that came out on it. And I remember I hadn't played Snake Eater until later on. And Metal Gear for me was huge. 1, 2 especially holds like a super special place in my heart. But when I played Metal Gear Solid 4 on the PS3, I was just like, nah, I'm good. I don't need this. Like, and I've never played it. I've never actually beat it. Because I remember that opening of the game, it's all metal. You're facing a bunch of Metal Gears. And I remember being like, where's the people? I don't want to shoot robots. This isn't what I want from this game. And then I just was like, no, I'm good, Dad. I don't want to play this. I'm fine. But I remember how important the PS3 was when it came out, just because it was super expensive, because it came out at like £500 or £600 back then, and they were like, get a second job if you want one, sort of thing. And like, do you have a memory for you when you eventually got a PS3? We'll start with Midas. Like, do you remember where you was or how you got your PS3?
And before I even say that, one thing I have to agree with you as well is the PS2 hockey, fam. I used to have this sick hockey game. There'd be sports that I'm not even into that I used to play on a PS2. Hockey, skiing, all of them kind of things. So the PlayStation 3 changed.
Can I just jump in for one quick second?
Go on, say much, G.
The PSP came out before the PS3.
I've got so many stories. No, but we've only got an hour, bro. I've got stories. Fair. I've got bro. I drew a PSP. This is how I got my first. The first console I ever bought of my own money was a PSP. I drew it and went downstairs to my mum and was like, "Mum, I want one of these." And my mum was like, "I can't afford it." So she got me a job at Clark's, where my mum worked, working out in the staff in the back room. They wouldn't pay me my wages, and they kept the money in the safe. They let me see it, because they were like, we're not stealing from you. They kept all my money in the safe. The game station was across the road. I remember the day it come out, bopping across the road like I was the baddest. Like, bought a bundle that had like a bunch of football games and Need for Speed, and I was off. Bro, the PSP was mad. Yeah.
Okay, if we don't have time, well,
we've only got an hour, so we're gonna miss the PS4. Maybe if we get an episode 1, we'll get to a PS4. Maybe.
Because I just have to say my piece. That
please do.
One of the biggest things about me as a gamer now, my favorite franchise of all time started for me on PSP, which is Monster Hunter. Like, Monster Hunter. Like, at this point, I've been to school and I've found some friends who are really into gaming. And my first ever, my G, that is what I like to see.
On Nintendo, people on Nintendo. He's got the Nintendo. That's an amiibo, everyone. I want everyone to know that that hoodie he's wearing. Apparently not that important. Apparently.
But yeah, like my first real like multiplayer, because I never had a network adapter for the PS2. So I used to play co-op with my brother on a few games. But like, going out into the world, and like I used to go to MCM Comic Con, take my PSP, and there'd be like Monster Hunter gatherings where you would like meet with people and hunt together. And so I just have to throw my piece out there. Like PSP and Monster Hunter was like a big part of my PlayStation history. So yeah, we can go back to PS3.
I never. That's one of the consoles I never chipped. I never chipped my PSP. I know a lot of people did, and it's one of the very few consoles that I never did get chipped. I remember obviously films for me was a big one. I had Spider-Man on the UMD. That was like lying in bed like, yeah, I'm gonna watch this film every single night. Remember waking up and just it landing on my face and stuff. Like, Jesus Christ. Did you have a PSP, Midas?
Yes, the PSP was so sick. Crisis Core, like sickest, one of the best Final Fantasy games.
That was
ever.
the first game I had on my PSP.
Basically, it was expanding from Final Fantasy 7, but you would have liked it because it was real time.
I know.
But you know what I really liked about the PSP? Like, I had all the Game Boys growing up, but Game Boys still felt proper kiddie. And my next door neighbor, like his parents had bare money, so he had everything you wanted, and he had a Game Gear, and not many people had a Game Gear. I remember he had a Game Gear with Shinobi, and the Game Gear was proper, like it was like the first PSP because it was a proper adult handheld. It wasn't like the Game Boy that felt all kiddie, but it was just at too higher price point. So by the time the PSP came out, like there was more adults, people who grew up in gaming, and we was able to experience. That was my first kind of adult handheld. So yeah, I loved the PSP. And don't worry about the PS4, man. That's new, man. We don't need to get into that. But as you asked me about the PlayStation 3, the PlayStation 3 was the most important console in my life to today.
Wow.
The most important console into my life to today, because not my favorite, but the most important. So just like you, I was a recording artist. So you still are actually. So let me not.
I mean, I ain't. I'm retired. MC
Okay,
just in
all
the
right.
name.
All right,
Look,
cool.
I do it to try and win competitions, and that's it. Let me tell you.
All right, so we were both recording artists.
Yeah.
And when the PlayStation came out in 2009, and that's when man first started writing and stuff like that. And my whole I literally didn't get a PlayStation 3 until the Slim came out. But when I used to go to studios, the man then would always have a PS3 in there.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really into FIFA. I used to love Pro back in the days.
Yeah, everyone loved PES. Everyone.
But they all had Tekken. Or they all had GTA. So we'd be in the studio, and while somebody else is recording, I'd have to play the PS3, and I was like, "This console's sick. What is hench? Like, why is it so big?" Like one time, I swear someone broke their toe on it in the studio, just hitting it.
Looks at my PS4. My PS5. Sorry. Hench is nothing compared to this thing.
But for real, it was hench and it was weighty. But like at that time, that was probably the biggest time that I didn't really get to game. Like, you know, we all have a time where we don't get to game, and you like career, work, girls, women, men, whatever you like. You start experiencing other things in life, and gaming isn't important. You're not seeing your friends that much, or if you are, maybe you lot are going to play footy at the park and stuff like that. And I never really gamed for a long time. Like, it wasn't really the thing. And then I started seeing all of these games, and Sainsbury's, which is a store in the UK, if you are from anywhere else.
Well, most of the people watching them, most of the subs that we have, probably American, so well done.
Exactly. So they did this mad sale. It was a 3-day sale of the PlayStation 3 Slim, and they knocked £100 off of it, fam. And it was gone everywhere. And then I remember my cousin was driving at that time. I was like, "Fam, take me." Took me to about 4 Sainsbury's. None of them had it, and I was like, "Oh." And he took me to one other Sainsbury's, but they said the deal was done, but it was still on the shelf. And I was like, "No, consumer rights means that I can buy it."
You're loyal than
I was tapping into that bag, and the guy was just like, "Yeah, just take it."
I don't give a shit, mate. Just take it, bro.
And the reason why I say this was the most important console in my life is before the PlayStation 3, playing games for me was still all about multiplayer. Like, I'm the oldest sibling. My sister's just turned 25. So like most of my gaming would be when I was younger, would be with my friends that come out, and then more and more I wouldn't see my friends, or they wouldn't come to your house so much. You'd go out and see them. And so all gaming for me was a multiplayer thing. And the PlayStation 3 was the first time that I tapped into being a single player gamer, what it means to be a single player gamer. And then the Uncharted series and learning about like Nathan Drake and being lost in a story and not even knowing that you could a game could feel like the biggest action movie. Like it can feel like the biggest action movie you ever experience, and like Arkham City and like actually feeling like Batman and feeling that strength, and GTA 5, like driving around listening to the radio and hearing the game girls talk and stuff like that. And that actually, that one console did more than every single console that I ever had, because it was like, oh, I can game on my own and I can get lost in a story. And it took me back to why I first started gaming, because when I was playing games like Secret of Mana and stuff, that was one base story, but this was something that I could connect with. And that was the first console that made me say, Nintendo who? Like that was the first time where I was like, no, that's when I fell in love with the PlayStation ecosystem. And you know me, I'm that loyal guy, I'm that fly flag kind of guy. Like if I ride with you, I ride with you. And like that's just how we are in the hood. And that's how I felt with PlayStation. And I felt like PlayStation did that for me. It's like Manchester United. I never used to watch football. And then when I started watching football, the first team I watched was Man United. So I supported Man United. Everyone was like, how can you support Man United? You're from Brixton. Fam, that's the first football team I watched. That's who I'm going to support. And that's what the PlayStation 3 did with me. And it's like, it really, really changed who I am as a person, as a gamer. And that's when I was like, I started hugging that thing. I was like, yeah, PS3, man.
That's so mad, because my experience is like the opposite. Like for me, PS3 is where I found proper multiplayer gaming, because on PSP I played Monster Hunter co-op, which was great, and I played like SOCOM like back in the day with my friends in like the ad hoc like local matches. But then my first game on PS3 was Modern Warfare, and I hooked that thing up to the internet and I was playing online, and I was just like, oh my god, this is just mind-blowing. And like suddenly there I am with like my whole, because at this stage I was probably just doing my GCSEs, so like, or maybe my first year of A levels or something, and like everyone at school, after school's over, go home and you're all smashing out Call of Duty and
4.
like yeah, and that was where it opened my eyes, man. So it was that, and obviously PS3 introduced another big part of my life, which is trophies. But we won't get into the trophy talk. But that made that.
Hey, this is the place to do it. This is the place to do it.
I started getting addicted to collecting trophies early on. Like it took me a while. Like I didn't care at first, but like Ratchet and Clank, was it a crack in time? I think that was the first PS3 Ratchet game that had trophies, and that was my first ever platinum. And ever since then, I've been a trophy hunter, and that was all PS3, baby. Like I was, because there were rumors that the PSP was supposed to have trophies, but they couldn't get it like ready in time and blah blah blah. But like, man, when I saw that and I started seeing that nice shiny platinum, I was like, oh, that's it. I'm in. I'm
glad we've got a Greg Miller now. I'm glad we've got our own Greg. What about you, Fixer?
Well, I mean, for me, the PlayStation 3 was a weird one. I remember, again, I played everything. So I had one at home when my dad had to replace it for a 360, because the 360 was my console. I was a PlayStation kid. Well, I was a Sega kid, then I was a PlayStation kid. I've been very privileged. I didn't grow up rich or anything like that, but it just happenstance of what my dad did for a living meant that I was able to take, not as often as you'd think, let me tell you, but he would bring home a PlayStation 3. He would bring home an N64. So the PlayStation 3 was that console. The 360 was mine. I was a 360 kid because it was cheaper, it was already out, and that was what I had bought into. Fight Night, again, like I said, was like the pinnacle. But I remember my cousin had a PS3. He bought it day one, and he had MotorStorm on it. And I remember being like, bro, this is next level. And do you remember the PS3 had the motion control in the controller as well? And I remember thinking that was really cool. So a lot of my experiences came from like playing with friends, like you said, co-op at other people's houses, sort of things like that. And then it was actually when I got with Haley, a friend of her brother's was like, oh, I'm selling my PS3 with a bunch of games. And I was like, does it have Last of Us? Does it have Last of Us? And he's like, yeah, I got Last of Us with it. You can buy it off me if you want, 60 quid or something like that. Like, he was doing me a proper sweet deal. He could have got more for it, definitely. And I remember like, yeah, I'll buy it. just so I could play The Last of Us, because I heard so much about Last of Us. So the PS3 era is kind of like the Ratchets and all these games that you guys have been talking about, right? The exclusives. And I have no history with any of them. So I see the new Ratchet and everyone's like, oh, new Ratchet. And I'm like, oh, this looks really good. But I have no touchstone to it. And it's the same thing. It was only like the PS4 generation where I was like, you know what? I'm in a position now where we get codes for games, me and Midas, and just because of what we do for a living, like, I need to broaden my horizon out from just being an Xbox guy. Yes, Xbox is always going to be with me. Xbox is always going to be what I cover for a living. Xbox is where I play a lot of my third parties, but I needed to go back and do my history to play The Last of Us. I had to play Uncharted, and I played 1, 2, and 3, and like being like, oh yeah, I see it now, I understand. And so slowly but surely, I'm still working my way through all of that history of what PlayStation really has. So the PS3 was kind of a misstep for me. I missed a lot of those iconic games, which is a shame. But again, there's still time. There's still time to film my history at the end of the day. But yeah. Yeah, man, it's a weird old time being a PlayStation fan. Again, it's everybody I know grew up on PlayStation, and Nintendo was their secondary. Always. Like, Nintendo had great games, but PlayStation was where it's at. We can quickly touch on topic of the show, which is PlayStation breaks another huge US sales record. In its first 5 months on the market, the PlayStation 5 has become the fastest selling console in the US. We don't need to go into any more details there. The question I just want to pose to both of you is, do you think the PS5 will be the best-selling console of this generation? Obviously... Go on.
I literally feel like PlayStation's done something incredible where it's taken to this generation, to people to actually realize PlayStation has a history. Because when we think about history of gaming, we think about Nintendo, we think about Mega Drive. We don't really put PlayStation or Microsoft in that ecosystem. And I feel like so many people who grew up in PlayStation are always going to buy that system. And they've marketed the PS5 incredibly. What's going to be the definitive addition of this is, one, how long these consoles last. Because if the PlayStation gets its own version of the red ring of death, then it's out of the window. And also really depends on what they're doing with these first party studios, which they're very, very good at.
The best.
Yeah, but this isn't, do you know what the thing is, right? It's in anyone's corner, and I'm always doing that. Like, I'm always going at Fixer, like, you're the Xbox guy and PlayStation. Yeah. It's all banter, really and truly. Doesn't matter. We're lucky that we have these incredible consoles. I'm lucky that I'm able to have both of these consoles. But I think if PlayStation keeps doing what they are doing, that there's no reason for them not to.
See, and I'm on the opposite side of that, especially with all the news that's just come out about PlayStation. I feel like they've become very arrogant. And I feel like more and more people are seeing what not only Xbox, but what Xbox has to offer now with Game Pass, what Epic's doing with their free games. And I feel like the market is becoming more split, more than it ever has. Like, us as console gamers, we live in like our own world, but more and more people that I speak to are like, yeah, I'm just going to buy a PC. I'm just going to buy a PC. I don't think that means PlayStation won't still have the best-selling console, because I think they have the best IP and some of the best studios, and I think that sells on itself, right? The next Naughty Dog game that comes out, everyone's going to want to play it. Same thing, I think Ghost of Tsushima 2, Spider-Man 2, they have these games that are going to move units, always. The only thing I think PlayStation does really well compared to anybody, which may help them remain in the minds of everyone that you need to buy them, is they do this stuff with like the celebrities, and they get it on Jimmy Kimmel, and they do like all these things that
Travis Scott,
all of that stuff, right? Which I think you don't see it happen with Nintendo. Like, they'll do the Pokemon concert with Post Malone, but that's very already talking to the same market. I'm talking about getting it out there to the casuals. PlayStation do it so well, and they signed a deal with FIFA, which Xbox used to have, which was genius because it gets that market. So, Rahul, I think you're on the same place as me where you was going, so I'll let you go there. Where are you at with it?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, like, I completely agree with everything you're saying, and like, it's interesting because I agree that they're definitely, like, hitting that wider casual audience, and that might help them in sales. But it's like the hardcore audience, slowly I feel like the momentum is shifting just from what I'm seeing on Twitter and the stories about them closing down the PS3 and Vita stores and game preservation, and then that whole Bloomberg report about what's happening at Bend, and like people being like, oh, they're mismanaging first parties, and you know, they've got all this momentum, but slowly it's like Xbox hitting all these massive home runs, no pun intended, but MLB just as an example.
Yep.
And like, it seems like there's a momentum shift. And actually for the hardcore gamers, like you talk about the celebrities, but like the voice and personality of the company, which matters to us. Like you've got your Phil Spencer front and center, you got Aaron Greenberg, whereas like our Sean Layden and Shuhei Yoshida's gone into the background now, and now Jim Ryan's very businessy. Yeah, Jim Ryan, and that's fine. But it's just like we don't necessarily have that same like personality that I used to have, and so there is a bit of a momentum shift. And I agree, like yeah, we've got the first parties, blockbuster games, but you know, right now I still maintain like I don't have a reason to buy a Series X or S, because if you have an Xbox One X, for example, and you got Game Pass, you're fine at least for another year or two.
Yep.
But you were talking about the generation. What happens when the new Fable comes out? What happens when all these first parties that they've acquired start pushing out games? And I don't want to get into the whole Bethesda exclusivity thing, but who knows?
We can do a whole show on that. We can do a whole show on that.
I don't know what's going to happen, but one way or the other, I feel like, I mean, you're already seeing it. Like Outriders was free on Game Pass and not on PlayStation.
Yep.
So where are people going to choose to play? So in 3 years' time, I think, who knows where we're going to be at? Like right now, I think it's great that they're the best-selling console. I don't know if it's going to last for the whole generation. That's where I'm at. Fair enough. I still love PlayStation. I mean, I'm going to buy Ratchet & Clank day one, and I'm going to platinum that in a weekend, fam. But
course. Yeah, come on. Let's plug, and get ourselves out of here. Midas, we'll start with you. Where can the people find you and follow your work?
So you can find me everywhere at Mr. Midas Games. I host a show called WTF Weekly on Sky TV, so you can catch that on Fridays and Saturdays at 10 p.m. if you've got Sky on jinx.tv, and that runs globally in the UK, Canada, Philippines, and South Africa. I've got my own YouTube channel where I talk PlayStation, Nintendo, sometimes Xbox, mainly RPGs, third-person action adventures, reaction, all of that stuff. You can catch that at Mr. Midas Games, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of them things there. Straight.
Rahul, where can people find you?
I do not have as much stuff to plug as Midas. You can find me on Twitter at Rahulahoop with an underscore. That is all.
You've got your Twitch as well. Where can people find you on Twitch?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I haven't streamed for a while, but it's been super busy at work. But you can find me twitch.tv/Rahulahoop with an underscore. Taking a bit of a hiatus, but I will be back streaming some stuff. I'm trying to sort out a PC so I can actually stream with all the bells and whistles and plugins and overlays. But until then, I do occasionally stream direct from PS5.
Fair enough. You can find me everywhere at MCFixer. Go check out my personal channel, youtube.com/MCFixer, where I do reactions, let's plays, and some tech stuff every now and then. Thank you all. The big important thing that I want to say to the audience is engagement. I'm not someone that stresses about views, but I do stress about engagement. So please, please, please be sure to like, share, drop us a comment on the feedback of this show. Do you want to see it continue, or is this just a one-off? I've had a great time doing it, but those are the important things. We want people's feedback. You can follow us all on Twitter, like we've said. Let us know. That's all I care about. Engagement, engagement, engagement. Share it with some friends. And I hope you enjoyed this very first pilot episode. And until next time, we will love you, leave you, and see you all later. Goodbye.